A few days back, my son attended my nephew's birthday party, and that's where everything went wrong. Both of them are 8 years old. They go to the same school, and a bunch of their friends were at this party. Before the party, he had been feeling a little under the weather, so I had asked him several times if he really wanted to go. But he had insisted that he felt fine enough to go. And that's why I let him, because he wasn't looking too bad, just a little tired. I figured that being with his friends would make him feel better, so I dropped him off at my sister's place. Then I went out to run some errands and catch a movie with my wife. In the meantime, for almost 3 hours, I kept trying to reach my sister to ask if my son was doing all right. I had informed her already that he had not been feeling the best before the party, so I would probably call to check up on him. But every time I called, she would just ignore me and the phone kept ringing. I even texted my son on the emergency phone that he has, but later on, I found out that it had been confiscated by my sister at the beginning of the party itself, because apparently she has this strict no screen policy in her house. And even when he started feeling very sick and wanted his phone back to call me, she declined. After almost 3 hours, when I was still not able to reach him, my wife and I started feeling a bit iffy about whatever was going on. And since it was getting late, we decided to just drop by and pick him up. When we showed up at the house, people had already started leaving, and when we entered, there were just a few kids left. Surprisingly, our son was not in the living room with the rest of the kids. And when I asked my sister, she started looking very embarrassed all of a sudden. She asked both of us to stay in the living room and she would go and get him. But I realized that there was something very fishy going on, because why would my son not be in the living room with the rest of the kids? So I followed her, even though she insisted that I should just stay in the living room. But I went after her with my wife, and while we were walking, she started explaining that during the party, my son had apparently started feeling very sick and wanted to call me. But she didn't believe him. She thought that he was just putting it on and seeking attention because that's what kids do. So when he started insisting and nagging her, she got a bit upset with him and put him in timeout in the basement, because she thought that he was going to ruin her son's birthday party that she had been planning for weeks. She didn't let him call me, and neither did she pick up my calls herself, because she was too busy with the party. And until we showed up, she had totally forgotten about him, so that's why she had been looking so uneasy. Naturally, I lost my calm while she explained everything, and I made her rush to the basement so she could open up and we could check on my son. Thankfully, he's all right now, but when we found him, he was sniffling constantly, shivering, and almost on the verge of unconsciousness. And he had even vomited on the floor of the basement a bunch of times. We wasted no time in rushing him to the nearby hospital ER, because even if there was nothing seriously wrong with him, we couldn't take that chance. My sister decided to get into her car and drive behind us, leaving her husband in charge of the other guests. We had left through the kitchen door because I didn't have any time for questions, and even though I had asked my sister not to come to the hospital with us since she was the last person I wanted to see, she still came along. While we were in the waiting area, she constantly kept apologizing to both of us, but we just ignored her. After a while the doctor was checking up on our son, I realized that my dad had shown up in the ER as well, along with my brother-in-law. The two of them asked us what was going on. Apparently, my sister hadn't even told them what was happening, but had informed her husband that she was in the hospital. After all the guests had left, they showed up, and my sister was about to tell them that everything was fine, but I went ahead full steam and told both of them what exactly had happened. I was very angry. I couldn't care less about how she came off in this incident. And naturally, both my father and her husband were horrified. Apparently, she had lied to all the guests, telling them that my son had left through the kitchen exit and I had picked him up because he was feeling slightly under the weather. But it was nothing serious, and nobody had to worry about him. And that seemed like a reasonable explanation. So nobody even suspected anything because obviously what she had done was extremely crazy and it wouldn't have occurred to anyone. After I told them the truth, my brother-in-law started fighting with her and calling her crazy and all that. But my husband just went quiet for a couple of minutes, and then he just turned to my sister and he told her that he had been considering setting up a trust fund for both of us and our future. But now he would only be leaving everything to me and the grandkids. She wouldn't receive anything and he would make sure of it. All of us were a bit shocked by this sudden declaration, and within a few seconds my sister started crying, but nobody sympathized with her. Now it's been a couple of days and my son is doing much better, but he's still a little traumatized. So we're working on that by spending as much time as we can with him. In the past few days, though, my sister has also been begging me to fix everything and try to talk to our father because she thinks that this is way too harsh of a punishment for what she did. Even her husband is not talking to her right now and is actively keeping their kid away from her. She has apologized at least a gazillion times by now, but I honestly don't care. She already did something horrible and she can't take it back. But in the back of my mind, I also feel a little weird about the fact that my dad has decided to cut her out of the trust fund because originally he had only named his 2 grandkids and both of us were fine with it. But now I'm included in it as well, and I'm the new beneficiary, and I don't know. It just feels weird, and I'm finding it hard to wrap my head around it. So basically, what I want to know is WIBTA for letting my dad name me as a trust fund beneficiary along with his grandkids and leave my sister out of this for what she did. Hey everyone, first of all, thank you so much for all the comments. My son is doing perfectly fine now, and we are very grateful that so many people seem to care about him. We're also very thankful for all the concern and support that has been shown to us in the comments. It's really, really sweet of you guys. Anyway, coming to what's been happening recently, I have decided to block my sister. It's been a week since the party now, and I think she should just count herself lucky that we have decided not to pursue any sort of legal action against her or report her for this, because I think we could very well do that. We just don't need that drama right now. It's going to take a lot of time and money to pursue this, and it's just not worth it. We have been throwing around the idea of reporting her to CPS, but that's only been a recent development. The reason I did not mention it in my previous post was because honestly, we were not even thinking about what to do about her. I was mostly just focused on my son and on the whole trust fund situation. It didn't even occur to me that I might have to report her and stuff, but I think it's a good idea to do that because she has a son herself. She sometimes has other kids over, and I really don't think that it's a good idea for her to have that going on right now. It's clear that there's something wrong with her at the moment. I don't know what it is, but normal people don't behave like this. So if I do report her to CPS, maybe they will suggest counseling or something, and she will be able to deal with her things better in the future. In the long run, it'll be good for her. Also, a couple of people were asking me why I hadn't just blocked her in the beginning itself. Why was I letting her text me in the first place? Honestly, it was just a moment of weakness for me. After our mother passed away a few years ago, my dad, my sister, and I had become a very close-knit unit. And that's why I trusted her enough to leave my son with her at the birthday party and take off with my wife for the evening. If I hadn't trusted her, I would have spent the entire evening with them because I usually don't let my son spend time at anybody's house for hours without thinking it through. We have been very close for the past few years. So I was finding it a bit difficult to block her, especially when she was going through all this in her personal life as well. I am a father, but I'm also her brother, so I was feeling kind of sad for her while I was also feeling angry about what she had done to my son. So there were just a lot of conflicting feelings, and I felt very lost. So I hadn't blocked her yet, but now I don't think I need to entertain any of this. I don't even need to feel bad for her, even if it was an honest mistake. It's just not one that people can afford to make with kids. These things can leave people scarred for life, and if she doesn't have the common sense to understand that, then maybe she shouldn't be having kids over at her house in the first place. Anyway, I'm going to speak to my dad today, and then we might report her to CPS. It won't be easy, but I seriously feel like this has to be done because what she did was really irresponsible and a horrible thing to do to anybody at all, not just a 7-year-old kid. And I can't let this go just because she's my sister. I probably wouldn't even have thought about reporting them twice had it been anybody else in her place. But only for her sake, we have been giving her the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, I don't think this is a situation where apologies can cut it. So it has been a couple of hours since my last update, and my wife and I just had dinner with my dad. We brought the topic up with him that we had been discussing the idea of reporting my sister to CPS. I didn't know how he would react to that because at the end of the day, she is still his daughter, and he might be upset with her, but I don't know if he would be okay with something like this because it's really serious. He thought about it for a while. I thought he was going to advise us against this, but in the end, he told us that we should do what we think is right. And if we think that we should report her to CPS, then by all means, we should go ahead. He was very frank about the whole situation and told us that even in the past, he had caught my sister being short with her own child many times. Most of the time, she would be very nice and calm, but sometimes she would just lose it over something very small and insignificant when he was over. And then her son would cry and she would try to make it up to him, but it was clear that she had a few issues controlling her temper. With my son, it just got really ugly, and he had advised her several times to get some counseling, go to parenting classes, and just find a healthier way to deal with her because honestly, kids are going to be kids. Kids are going to screw up all the time. They're going to make a lot of mistakes and they will not be perfect and easy to deal with. But as parents, we can't afford to make them feel bad and scare them all the time. She said she would do something about it, but she never did. And after this incident, my dad decided that it was enough, and he told us that he should have brought it up with her in a more serious way, but he never thought that things would come to something like this. I don't even blame him because I don't think anybody could have thought that he would do something like this. We don't even assume that people can be capable of stuff like this until they do something like that. Anyway, the bottom line was that my dad told me to go ahead, and he thought that since our child who had to go through something like this, it should be our decision entirely, and it was not even necessary to ask for advice on it. But of course, there is going to be an investigation, and if he has asked anything, he's going to be truthful about everything. So that was a relief. And I really hope that my sister cooperates with CPS because that way she'll be let off easy. And I'd honestly say that's the goal here. I don't want her to get in trouble. I just want her to be better and learn something from this. I also spoke to my father about the trust fund. I told him that I had been feeling a bit uneasy about it since I knew that originally it was intended just for the grandkids. But he told me that he had been thinking about adding me and my sister as beneficiaries as well for a while now, and he had been planning on surprising us with that information on Christmas. His business has been doing very well, and he ends up saving a lot of money because he has a pretty modest lifestyle and doesn't need much. So he thinks that it's fair enough for me to be added as a beneficiary, and since it's his money, nobody can tell him what to do. Even if my sister does think it's unfair, she's just going to have to deal with it. Because the fact remains that what she did on the day of the party was simply not acceptable. My father also pointed out the fact that it's not like she's not going to be able to survive on the money that she makes right now. She's a working woman. Even her husband works, and they make a decent amount of money together. So she's going to be just fine, and he's going to be around for quite a while, so it's not like I'm going to be getting the money from the trust fund anytime soon, since he is in pretty good health. That's going to happen way into the future, and I don't need to worry about it right now. After speaking to him about it, I feel a lot better, and I don't feel that guilty anymore. And I really don't think that I had to feel guilty in the first place. It's not like I was doing anything wrong. I didn't coerce or force my father to do something like that. He did this of his own accord, and I'm not going to worry about this being unfair or whatever anymore. I'm just not going to stress myself about anything that I don't have to anymore, because it's just not worth it. If my sister feels bad about any of this, tough luck. But she really should have thought things through. And that's all I have to say on this. Anyway, I'm glad that I had dinner with my dad and spoke to him about all these things, because speaking to him really gave me a sense of clarity that I needed. Now, both my wife and I know what to do, and we are going to go ahead and do it. We just hope that something good comes out and the situation doesn't spiral out of control. I really do have my fingers crossed that my sister will acknowledge her mistakes, show remorse, and take steps to rectify everything. Hey guys, so after my last update, there were a lot of people who had said that there was no need for me to report my sister to CPS anymore, because right now my child was safe and I didn't have to worry about anything. But like I said, this was not about getting my sister in trouble or getting revenge on her. This was just about doing the right thing. I knew that if she was truly and really apologetic about the situation, she would cooperate. And I knew that since my child was currently safe, CPS probably wouldn't take this very far, since I had discussed it with a friend of mine who works with the organization closely, being a foster care worker. And I had done my own research as well before taking a step like this, because I knew that this could go wrong very quickly. But ultimately, it was about doing the right thing, since she has a kid of her own and she has kids over sometimes as well. So I went ahead and reported her anyway. And of course, the caseworker who got in touch with us did ask us why there was such a delay. And we had to explain that since it was my sister that we were talking about, I had been confused about whether I should do this or not. But now I was confident about my decision. It's been 2 weeks since then, and the caseworker has gotten in touch with my sister as well. He did speak to both my wife and I. We gave him a thorough account of whatever happened, and then my son was also spoken to separately, and he was a bit nervous about it. But he did share everything that happened. We also showed her the medical records from the ER and the later visit to the doctor, and confirmed that it had been an emergency because my son had a severe case of food poisoning. That was not my sister's fault. But even then, she should have taken it seriously. After speaking to us, within 6 days, my sister received a visit, and from what I'm hearing, she was cooperative and extremely apologetic. By the end, she was actually in tears, but she did not make a big deal out of her emotions and stuck to the truth. Showed the caseworker around the house, and since the basement was not exactly a hazardous place, it was just really cold. And the caseworker told us that they were going to get in touch with their supervisor and let us know about the decision soon enough. We did try and get her to tell us what was going to happen, but she told us that that decision was not exactly up to her. She could only make recommendations, but she definitely would recommend that since my sister had been very cooperative and apologetic throughout the visit, and from the initial investigation and findings, she could tell that while it was bad, it had probably been a one-time thing. So she would suggest counseling and parenting classes for my sister to her supervisor as per our request. Even though we don't know the decision yet, I'm hoping that that's what happens. And this doesn't go too far. It's been a week and a half since my last update. And a couple of days ago, the caseworker reached out to us again and said that a decision had been made. And thankfully, our suggestions were taken into account. My sister had shown that she really wanted to improve, and even her husband and son had said that while she does have issues with her temper, sometimes something like this had only happened once, and they would try their best to make sure that it never happens again. Taking all of that into account, it was decided that she would have to attend counseling sessions and parenting classes until the situation was deemed to be better, and she was not supposed to have any sort of unsupervised contact with my son. The last bit is already not happening, so we are fine with that. And about that, this has turned out exactly like what we had wanted. So we are thankful for that. The caseworker is going to stay in touch with us and my sister to monitor the family equation closely, but for now, this is it. I haven't spoken to my sister yet, nor has she tried to reach out to me, and it's the same with my brother-in-law as well. I don't even know if they are talking to each other yet, because the last I had heard, he was not speaking to her and he was trying to keep their son away from her as well. But since he has stood by her during this time, I'm hoping that the situation is better in their home as of now. I have kept my father updated throughout the whole thing, and now that we finally have a decision, we are finally able to breathe again. Because this had been very stressful for all of us, not just my sister or me. This is probably the first time something like this has ever happened in our family. And of course, we're not used to dealing with stuff like this. So until we had a decision, this was the only thing on our minds. But I'm happy that we were able to sort things out without much of a fuss. And mostly, I'm just glad that my sister has decided to seek help and improve herself. As for my son, he's pretty much back to normal. He's playing, laughing, jumping around, and doing everything that kids his age do. At school, he's also hanging out with my nephew, regardless of the situation between me and my sister. And that's really the way it ideally should be. Whatever the equation is between us currently, we have not let that affect the kids. I didn't speak about it earlier because there were other important things to mention. But I think it's about time that I speak about this as well, because there have been some questions about it. Since my kid and her son go to school together, it's natural that they will interact a lot, and they are quite close, which is why they have continued their relationship uninterrupted. I didn't have a problem with it at all when my son was coming back from school wanting to go over to my nephew's place to play with him. I was just glad that they were blissfully unaware of everything that was going on with their parents. But of course, I couldn't take him. So I had to disappoint him a bit there because I wasn't sure if my sister would want me there or not. However, apart from that, I was glad to know that they were keeping up their friendship. At first, I was not sure if my sister would appreciate her son hanging out with my son anymore. But even she hasn't had any problems with it. So I think we are at a place where we can let them be. And I think even though they're really little, it's important to respect what they want as well. So when things get a little calmer, I think I'm finally going to go over to her place with my son and let the kids play together, because my son has told me a bunch of times that he wants things to go back to how they were before. He wants to go over to his cousin's place and hang out with him, and he's not even scared of his aunt anymore. It's easy for him to forget about it, not so much for us. But for his sake, I will try to talk to my sister and see if she would be open to the idea of them having play dates like they used to before. If not at her place, she can always have her husband drop off my nephew at my place, since we sometimes used to do that as well. Anyway, right now, I think we should just let things be. But in the future, I'm definitely going to try and do something about it, because I don't want to disappoint my son. And I definitely don't want him to cut ties with his cousin. They are very close, and I want them to keep this friendship up regardless of the family dynamics and all that. Hey, so it's been a couple of months and my sister and I are not exactly back to normal. But I did speak to her about our children, and we have resumed our dates. Of course, she still doesn't have any unsupervised contact with my son, just like the caseworker had suggested. And we are making sure of it. She's also attending counseling sessions and parenting classes and trying to bring her temper under control. She's also told me that she wasn't very happy when she found out that I had reported her to CPS, even though she had apologized to me. But she could understand why I did so, and she doesn't think things can go back to normal between us. But she's still going to try for the sake of our kids, and I agree with her. I really don't think that things can go back to how they used to be, but for the sake of our kids, we are definitely going to try. She and her husband are also attending marriage counseling. My brother-in-law and I are on speaking terms again, so he told me about it and said that in the beginning, he had been very upset with her. He didn't want to talk to her or even let her around his son, but with time, he realized that this kind of silent treatment behavior is only going to hurt the family. So he decided to deal with it. And since he doesn't want to get a divorce, they have decided to try and work things out. As of now, things are going well for them, and I really do feel happy for them. My father and sister have still not spoken to each other yet. He refuses to talk to her first, and she refuses to acknowledge his existence. I don't know what's going to happen there, but like I said, I'm not going to worry myself about anything that's not directly my concern. They are both adults. So if they want to work it out, they will do so. For now, I'm just